The Dragon's Wish, written by Tony Cranston. Long, long, long ago, in an old village in old China, there lived a little girl, and her name was May. Now, in Chinese, May means pretty or beautiful, and she was called Mei Mei because she was twice as beautiful. Mei not just had a pretty or a beautiful face, but she also had a beautiful heart. Now Mei lived with her grandfather, and he was called Lao Nan. Lao in Chinese means old and Nan means man. And that was a lovely name for an old grandfather. Lao Nan was very good at embroidery. He would make costumes and stitch clothes with beautiful embroidery of phoenixes and dragons and pretty princesses, and that's how he made his living. His work was very popular. One day he made the costume of the goddess Guanyin, who happens to be the goddess of poor people and the goddess of dragons. And this costume was made for a little girl who was celebrating her birthday party, and she lived in the next village. So Lao Nan asked Mei if Mei was happy to deliver the parcel, and Mei was glad to help him. So he wrapped up the costume in a brown envelope and gave it to Mei. Mei had to cross a forest, climb a hill, and then go and give it to this little girl's house, which was in the next village. As she set forward for her journey, she entered the forest, and suddenly she heard these crack, 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 whipping, beating sounds as if somebody was hitting someone. And somebody was howling and crying, "Oh, no, please, please let me go. I haven't done anything to you. Please, please don't hurt me. Please don't hit me." But these people who looked like big bullies and bandits and pirates were constantly hitting and whipping, and there was this cracking sound and laughing sound, and they just wouldn't let go. And Mei hid behind the trees, and when she peeped, she saw that it was a little dragon whom they had tied up, and they were beating him mercilessly. And the dragon was pleading them to let him go, but they just wouldn't let him go, and they were laughing and they were hurting him. Mei was a clever girl. She quickly unfastened the parcel, and wore the costume of the goddess Guanyin, and she climbed up the rock and stood there, and she gathered all the courage and all the strength that a little girl could muster for herself, and in the loudest of voice she stood on the rock in the dark and she called out, "Leave that dragon alone right now." And as these people heard the sound coming from nowhere in the midst of all this, they stopped to look who on earth dared to call out them and to stop them. And suddenly they saw the goddess Guanyin on the rock. And one of them said, "Oh, look, it seems as if it's the goddess Guanyin, the goddess Guanyin, the goddess of the dragons and poor people, and if she gets us, then we are dead, so let's go. And after all, bandits and pirates and mean people, they are also a little coward and scared at the heart, and so they quickly fled away from there. Now Mei came there, and she untied this poor dragon who was hurt, and he was so thankful to her. He was so grateful that Meme saved his life. And he said, I know who you are. I know you're a very kind girl. Ask me for 3 wishes and I will give it to you. So Meme quickly asked and said that, oh, I wish we had lots of money, me and my granddad, so that we could live comfortably. And before she completed saying that, there were sacks and sacks of coins and money all around her. And he said, you can ask for a second wish. And Meme thought and she said, oh, I love to wear jewelry and, crowns and rings and necklaces like those of the pretty princesses and the queens. And before she could finish saying, everywhere around her there were crowns and jewels and pretty rings and necklaces, and she loved it all. And for her third wish, she thought and asked that I wish me and Launan had a big house to live in the village. And when she returned back, she indeed saw that her hut had transformed into a big palatial house. And after that, Launan and Meme lived happily because there was nothing else that she wished for. But one day, someone in the village got the sniffles. They felt cold and they shivered and they wanted to go to bed to keep themselves warm. And when they went to bed, they never woke up the next morning. One after the other, people in her village fell sick. They shivered and they sniffled and they got cold and they wanted to keep warm and they would go to bed and they would never wake up. They were dead. A terrible plague had come to the village. And Meme spent all her money calling doctors from far across to treat the people in her village. But there was nobody who could help. People were dying, one after the other. Uncles and aunties and little boys and girls and grandparents and grandfathers and grandmothers. There were so many who fell sick and they were dying. One day, Launan got the sniffles. And he shivered and he wanted to go to bed. And Meme thought, oh no, not Launan, not Launan. What am I going to do without him? And she wished and she prayed and she prayed and she wished that how she could have some wishes. And there from the clouds appeared a little dragon. And he came and he told Meme, I know you are a very kind girl. I know you, Meme. You saved my life once. Ask me for 3 wishes and I'll give it to you. And Meme quickly said, oh, I wish all this terrible plague and all this illness goes away from my village and nobody is falling sick and nobody dies. And immediately in some time, the plague vanished and people didn't fall sick and they were all right. And then she said, but what about those people, those uncles and aunties and those boys and girls and grandfathers and grandmothers who have just died? Is there a way they can come back? And she heard all those, happy smiling and chattering nearby and people hugging each other. And there was so much of, happiness all around. It seemed as if all those people just came back who had died a while ago. And she still had one more wish to go. And Meme thought to herself, and she thought that what did those wishes, those rich things, those money and those jewels and crowns did? Nothing. It just couldn't help. And so she told the dragon that you can keep the 3rd wish for yourself. You can wish something for you. And this dragon was surprised because he never had a wish. He never knew what to do with a wish. So he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he knew what he wanted. He said, I wish that all the dragons are disguised from this day as little boys and little girls, so that no one ever captures little dragons or beats them or hurts them. And so, to this day, you never find any dragons because they are all disguised as little girls and little boys. So that was the story, A Dragon's Wish, written by Tony Cranston.